Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
My name is Christina Cox, and I've spent the last 8 years of my life helping women bring new life into this world. As a certified nurse midwife, I thought I'd seen it all. The raw beauty of birth, the strength of women in their most vulnerable moments, the miracle of first breaths and first cries. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for Luna Kelly. It was a Thursday evening in October. The autumn air carried that crisp promise of winter, and the leaves outside Murphy's pool hall rustled like whispered secrets. I'd chosen this place specifically because it was the antithesis of my sterile, clinical world, all dark wood, neon beer signs, and the satisfying crack of pool balls colliding. I needed the noise, the anonymity, the chance to be just Christina. For a few hours, not the composed professional who guided women through the most intense experience of their lives. I was nursing my second beer, watching a group of college kids fumble through a game of 8-ball when she walked in. Luna moved with this fluid confidence that made everyone else in the room seem to be moving through molasses. Her dark hair caught the overhead lights, and when she turned to scan the room, I felt my breath catch. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was something in the way she carried herself, purposeful, grounded, like she knew exactly who she was and where she belonged in the world. Our eyes met across the room, and I swear time stopped. Just for a second, maybe two, but long enough for something to pass between us. Recognition? Curiosity? I couldn't tell, but I felt heat rise in my cheeks as she smiled, not the polite smile you give strangers, but something warmer, more knowing. She approached the bar, ordered something I couldn't hear over the music. And then, to my complete surprise, she walked over to my table. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, and her voice was like honey over gravel, smooth and rich, with just a hint of roughness that made my stomach flutter. "I'm Luna." "Christina," I managed, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Please." She sat with the same fluid grace she'd walked with, and up close, I could see the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way they seemed to take in everything, my scrubs peeking out from under my jacket, the tiredness I was trying to hide, the nervous way I was fidgeting with my beer bottle. "Long day?" she asked, and something in her tone told me she understood long days. Understood the weight that settled on your shoulders when your job meant being responsible for other people's most precious moments. "Every day is a long day," I said then. Laughed at how that sounded. "Sorry, that came out more dramatic than I intended. I'm a midwife, you?" Her face lit up in a way that transformed her from beautiful to radiant. "No way. I'm a midwife too, but I specialize in home births and natural birthing techniques. Luna Kelly, Peaceful Beginnings Birth Services." The coincidence felt too perfect, like the universe was playing some cosmic joke. But as we started talking, I realized it wasn't coincidence at all. It was destiny wearing the mask of chance. "Peaceful Beginnings," I repeated. "I've heard of you. You're the one who does all that breathing work, the massage techniques. Some of my clients have mentioned wanting to try your methods." "Guilty as charged," she said with a grin that made my heart skip. Though I prefer to think of it as helping women remember what their bodies already know how to do. Birth isn't a medical emergency. It's the most natural thing in the world. We've just forgotten how to trust ourselves. I found myself leaning forward, drawn in by her passion. That's beautiful. I mean, I believe in natural birth too, obviously, but the way you talk about it." I trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. "The way I talk about it, what?" she prompted gently. "It's like you see something sacred in it. Something I think I used to see, but maybe lost somewhere along the way." Her expression softened, and she reached across the table to touch my hand briefly. The contact was electric, not just the physical sensation, but the way her touch seemed to ground me, center me in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You want to play?" she asked, nodding toward the empty pool table in the corner. I hadn't played pool in years, not since college, but something about her invitation, the challenge in her eyes, the playful curve of her lips, made me nod before I could overthink it. As we walked to the table, I watched the way she moved, the confidence in her stride. She chalked her cue with practiced ease, and I realized this wasn't her first time here. "8-ball?" she asked, racking the balls with quick, efficient movements. "Sure, but fair warning, I'm terrible at this." She laughed, a sound that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside her. "Good, I like easy wins." But as we played, it became clear that winning wasn't really the point. Every time she bent over the table to line up a shot, I found myself watching the curve of her back, the way her hair fell forward to frame her face. When she missed a shot, which I suspected was more often than usual, she'd step back with this theatrical sigh that made me laugh despite myself. "So," she said, circling the table to find her next shot, "what got you into midwifery?" It was the standard question, the one I'd answered 1,000 times at dinner parties and professional conferences. But something about the way she asked it, the genuine curiosity in her voice, made me want to give her a real answer. "My sister," I said, surprised by my own honesty. "She had a really traumatic birth experience with her first baby. The doctors treated her like she was just a vessel, like her fear and pain didn't matter as long as the baby came out healthy." I watched her go through that, and I thought, there has to be a better way. Luna paused, her cue halfway to the ball, and looked at me with such intensity that I felt exposed, seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "And you became that better way," she said softly. "I try to be." I lined up my own shot, grateful for something to focus on besides the way she was looking at me. "What about you?" "My mom," she said simply. "She's a doula, has been for 30 years. I grew up thinking birth was this incredible, powerful thing women did, not something that happened to them. When I was 16, she let me attend my first birth, and..." She shook her head, smiling at the memory. "I knew, just like that, I knew." We played for another hour, the conversation flowing as easily as the beer. She told me about her unconventional childhood, growing up in a commune in Northern California where birth and death were seen as natural transitions, not medical events. I found myself sharing stories I rarely told anyone. The birth that went wrong despite everything I did right. The mothers who credited me with saving their lives when I felt like I was just fumbling through. The loneliness of being the person everyone turned to, but having no one to turn to myself. "You know what I think?" she said as we finished our game. She'd won, as predicted, but barely. "I think you need to remember what drew you to this work in the first place. The sacred part, not just the clinical part. And how do I do that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Come to one of my workshops," she said, pulling a business card from her wallet. "This Saturday, actually. It's about relaxation techniques for labor, but really it's about connecting with your body, trusting your instincts. I think you might like it." I took the card, my fingers brushing hers in the exchange. This time, neither of us pulled away. Immediately, the moment stretched between us, charged with possibility. "I'll think about it," I said, though we both knew I'd already decided Saturday came faster than I expected, or maybe I was just counting the hours. I changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft sweater, casual but not sloppy, approachable, but not trying too hard. At least, that's what I told myself as I stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Luna's workshop was held in a converted warehouse space downtown, all exposed brick and high ceilings, with afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. The space felt warm and inviting, with yoga mats arranged in a circle and soft music playing in the background. About 15 women were already there when I arrived, all in various stages of pregnancy, all looking simultaneously excited and nervous. And then there was Luna, moving between them like a graceful dancer, her hands gentle as she helped adjust positions, her voice soft and encouraging. She was wearing a flowing dress that seemed to move with her, and her hair was pulled back in, a loose bun that somehow managed to look both effortless and elegant. When she saw me, her face broke into that radiant smile again, and I felt my anxiety melt away. "Everyone," she said, clapping her hands softly to gather attention, "I'd like you to meet Christina. She's a certified nurse midwife and will be observing today to learn some of our techniques." The women welcomed me warmly, and I found myself settling onto a mat next to a woman named Sarah, who was about 7 months along with her first baby. "Luna's amazing," Sarah whispered to me. I was so scared about labor, but she's teaching me that my body knows what to do. As the workshop began, I watched Luna transform. The playful woman from the pool hall was still there, but now she was also something more, a teacher, a guide, a keeper of ancient wisdom. She moved through the room like she was conducting a symphony, her voice weaving stories about birth and strength and the power women carried within themselves. "Breathe into your belly," she instructed, her own hand demonstrating on her flat stomach, not your chest, your belly. "Feel the breath fill you up from the bottom like you're filling a balloon." I found myself following along, even though I wasn't pregnant. The breathing was deeper than anything I typically did, more intentional. It made me aware of my body in a way I rarely was during my busy days at the clinic. Now, Luna continued, I want you to think about tension. Where to? You hold it, your shoulders, your jaw, your hips. She moved around the circle, her hands gentle as she helped women identify their trouble spots. When she reached me, she paused. May I? She asked, her hands hovering near my shoulders. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Her touch was professional, clinical even, but it sent shivers through me nonetheless. Her fingers found the knots of stress I'd been carrying for months, pressing gently until I felt something release. You hold a lot here, she murmured, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral, with an undertone of sandalwood. It's common for healthcare providers. We carry everyone else's tension along with our own. She moved on to the next woman, but I felt marked by her touch, changed in some subtle way. The workshop continued with massage techniques, visualization exercises, and something Luna called birth mapping, imagining the perfect birth experience in vivid detail. As I watched her work with each woman, I began to understand what she'd meant about seeing the sacred in birth. She didn't just teach techniques. She helped women remember their own power. The same breath that will bring your baby into the world, she told the group as we neared the end, is the breath that can calm any storm, ease any pain, center you in any moment of chaos. It's not just for labor, it's for life. After the other women left, I lingered, helping Luna clean up the space. We worked in comfortable silence, folding mats and putting away supplies, but I could feel the questions building between us. So, she said finally, what did you think? I said carefully, that you're right. I have lost sight of the sacred part. Watching you today, ... It reminded me why I fell in love with this work in the first place. She smiled, but there was something vulnerable in her expression. Can I ask you something? Of course. When you were doing the breathing exercises, what did you feel? It was such a simple question, but it made me pause. What had I felt? Peace, yes, but also something else. Something like recognition, like coming home to a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. Calm, I said finally. More calm than I felt in months, maybe years. The techniques I teach for labor, she said, moving closer, they work for other kinds of ... intensity too. There was something in the way she said it that made my pulse quicken. We were standing close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Christina, she said softly, and my name on her lips sounded different somehow, more intimate. Can I be honest with you about something? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I've been thinking about you all week, ever since the pool hall. I keep wondering ... double quote, she trailed off, suddenly looking uncertain. Wondering what? I prompted, my heart hammering against my ribs. Wondering if you felt it too, that connection. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and risk. I could deflect, make some joke about professional networking, retreat, into the safe shell of my clinical persona. Or I could be brave. Yes, I whispered. I felt it. Her smile was like sunrise, slow and warm and transformative. Would you like to have dinner? Not as colleagues, not as networking, as ... double quotes, as what? I asked though, I thought I knew. As two women who might be interested in getting to know each other better. It was such a careful way to phrase it, giving me room to retreat if I needed to, but I didn't want to retreat. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I wanted to move towards something, towards someone. I liked that very much. I said Luna chose a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. It was intimate without being presumptuous, romantic without being overwhelming. Perfect, really, for a first date that neither of us was quite ready to call a first date. We'd changed clothes. She was in a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes, and I'd chosen a black blouse that I hoped struck the right balance between professional and alluring. We were both nervous, I could tell, but it was the good kind of nervous, the kind that comes with new beginnings and infinite possibility. So, she said as we settled into our booth, tell me something I wouldn't learn from your professional. Bio? Like what? I asked, grateful for the dim lighting that hid my blush. I don't know. What do you do when you're not helping bring babies into the world? What makes Christina laugh? What scares her? What keeps her up at night? They were such simple questions, but I realized it had been a long time since anyone had asked them. Most of my conversations revolved around work, my social life mostly limited to other healthcare providers who understood the demands of the job. I read, I said, then laughed at how boring that sounded, obsessively. Everything from medical journals to trashy romance novels. I have this tiny apartment that's basically just shelves and shelves of books. What kind of romance novels? She asked with interest, not judgment. The kind where the woman saves herself, I said without thinking, then felt heat rise in my cheeks. I mean, double quote. I know what you mean, she said softly. And I think that says something beautiful about you. The waiter came to take our order, giving me a moment to collect myself. When he left, Luna leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand. What else? She asked. I dance, I admitted. Alone, in my apartment, usually after really hard days. It's completely ridiculous, but there's something about moving my body that just releases everything I've been holding. That's not ridiculous at all, she said. Movement is healing. What kind of dancing? Everything. Salsa, contemporary, sometimes just wild flailing to whatever's on the radio. You probably think I'm crazy. I think you're wonderful, she said simply, and the sincerity in her voice made my chest tight. Our conversation flowed as easily as it had at the pool hall, but there was an added layer now, an undercurrent of attraction that neither of us was trying to hide. She told me about her travels, 6 months in Guatemala learning traditional earthing practices, a summer in Scotland studying with a master herbalist, countless workshops and retreats where she'd gathered the techniques she now taught. I've always been drawn to the old ways, she said. Not because they're old, but because they remember what we've forgotten, that birth is powerful, that women are powerful, that our bodies know things our minds haven't learned yet. Is that why you became a midwife? To help women remember? Partly, she said, then looked down at her wine glass. And partly because I wanted to understand my own body better. There was something in her tone that made me pay closer attention. What do you mean? She was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd overstepped. But then she looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I've never been pregnant, she said. Never even tried. For a long time, I thought that made me less qualified somehow, like I was missing some essential piece of the puzzle. But working with all these women, learning these techniques, it's taught me that the capacity for creation, for bringing something new into existence, isn't just about babies. What is it about? I asked softly. It's about opening, about surrender, about trusting your body to know what it needs. She paused, her eyes never leaving mine. About being vulnerable enough to let someone else guide you through the process. The air between us shifted, charged with new meaning. I understood now that we weren't just talking about birth anymore. Luna, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Christina, she replied, and there was a question in the way she said my name. Our hands found each other across the table, fingers intertwining like they'd been designed to fit together. Her skin was warm and soft with calluses from years of massage work that somehow made her touch even more appealing. I have to tell you something, she said. I've never done this before. Done what? This dinner with someone I ... She struggled for words. Someone I'm attracted to like this. I mean, I've dated, but never someone who makes me feel like I'm going to come apart just from holding their hand. Her honesty was breathtaking, and it made me want to be equally brave. I know the feeling, I said. I keep thinking about your hands, about how gentle they were during the workshop, how they seemed to know exactly where to touch. She inhaled sharply, her grip on my hand tightening. Christina ... And I keep wondering, I continued, amazed by my own boldness, what it would feel like if you used those techniques on me. Not for birth, but for other kinds of opening. The silence that followed was electric. Around us, the restaurant continued its gentle hum of conversation and clinking silverware, but it felt like we existed in our own bubble, our own private universe where anything was possible. Would you like to find out? She asked finally. My heart hammered so hard I was sure she could hear it. Yes, I said. God, yes. Luna's apartment was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected. It was in an old Victorian house that had been converted into units, and hers was on the second floor with tall windows and original hardwood floors. But where I'd expected the typical millennial apartment, IKEA furniture and inspirational wall decals, I found something more like a sanctuary. Soft fabrics draped over furniture, plants in every corner reaching toward the light, books stacked on surfaces and shelves with the casual abundance of someone who lived with words. Candles provided most of the lighting, and the air smelled like sandalwood and something I couldn't identify, but that made me think of moonlight and secrets. Wine? She asked, suddenly seeming as nervous as I felt. Please, I said, though I wasn't sure I needed anything else to lower my inhibitions. She poured 2 glasses of red wine, her hands only slightly unsteady, and we stood in her living room sipping and trying not to stare at each other too obviously. So, she said after a moment that stretched just a beat too long. So, I echoed, and we both laughed. I'm nervous, she admitted. Me too, I said. Good nervous or bad nervous? She considered this seriously, her head tilted in that way I was already learning meant she was really thinking. Get nervous, she decided. Like standing at the edge of something beautiful and not knowing if you're going to fall or fly. I like that metaphor, I said, moving closer. What do you think happens when we jump? I guess we find out together. She set down her wine glass and turned to face me fully. In the candlelight, her skin looked golden, and I could see the pulse beating at the base of her throat. Without thinking, I reached up to touch it with my fingertips, and she inhaled sharply. Your heart is racing, I murmured. Yours too, she said, her hand coming up to rest against my chest. We stood like that for a moment, feeling each other's heartbeats, the intimacy of it almost overwhelming. Then Luna's other hand came up to cup my face, her thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. The breathing techniques I teach, she said. Softly, they're about more than just managing pain. They're about presence, about being fully in your body, fully in the moment. Show me, I whispered. Her hand moved from my face to rest on my stomach, just below my ribs. Breathe with me, she said, deep and slow. Feel the breath fill your belly, then your ribs, then your chest. I followed her instruction, my breath syncing with hers, and felt something in me begin to relax, to open. Her hand was warm through my blouse, grounding me in sensation. That's it, she murmured, her voice taking on the same quality it had during the workshop. Gentle, hypnotic, completely focused. Now, as you breathe out, let go of any tension you're holding. Your shoulders, your jaw, ... Her free hand began to massage my shoulders, finding the knots of stress with unerring accuracy. I felt myself melting under her touch, the combination of breath and pressure working magic I hadn't known was possible. How does that feel? She asked. Incredible, I breathed. I had no idea ... This is just the beginning, she said, her hands moving to work the tension from my neck. The same techniques that help women open for birth can help us open for pleasure, for connection, for vulnerability. Her words sent heat spiraling through me, and I felt my breathing change, becoming shallower, more urgent. Stay with the breath, she coached gently. Don't chase the feeling, just let it build naturally. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, staying present instead of rushing toward release, but also the most rewarding. Every touch felt magnified, every sensation more intense because I was fully there for it. Her hands moved to the buttons of my blouse, pausing. Is this okay? More than okay, I managed. She undressed me slowly, reverently, her hands and lips following the path of revealed skin. When she guided me to her bedroom, I was floating on sensation and breath, more present in my body than I'd been in years. Her bed was low and wide, covered in soft fabrics that felt like silk against my skin. She undressed in the candlelight, unself-conscious and beautiful, then joined me on the bed. I want to show you something, she said, her hands beginning their magic again. A technique for helping women through the intensity of transition, the hardest part of labor, when they feel like they can't go on. Her touch became more focused, more purposeful, her hands reading my body like a map she'd studied her whole life. She used the same breathing she taught in the workshop, the same gentle pressure, the same patient building of sensation. Breathe into it, she coached as I began to climb towards something that felt bigger than anything I'd experienced before. Don't fight it, don't rush it. Let your body do what it knows how to do. And when I finally crested that wave, it was with the same breath I'd seen her teach women in labor, the same surrender, the same trust in the wisdom of my own body. The release was unlike anything I'd ever felt, not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, a complete letting go that left me shaking and changed. Luna held me as I came back to myself, her hands gentle on my skin, her voice soft in my ear. That was. I started, then trailed off, not having words. That was you trusting your body, she said simply. That was you remembering what you already knew. I turned in her arms to face her, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. This woman who taught women to trust themselves had just taught me the same lesson, but in a language I'd never learned before. Your turn, I said, my hands beginning their own exploration of her body, determined to give her the same gift she'd given me. The weeks that followed felt like living in a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Luna and I fell into each other's lives with the ease of puzzle pieces finding their perfect fit. She would appear at the birthing center after my long shifts with takeout from whatever ethnic restaurant she had discovered that week, and I would show up at her workshops when I could, ostensibly to observe, but really just to watch her work her magic. Our relationship developed in layers. There was the professional respect. She began referring clients to me when they needed medical intervention, and I started incorporating her breathing techniques into my practice. There was the friendship, long conversations over wine about everything from politics to poetry, shared laughter over inside jokes that developed their own mythology. And there was the physical connection that seemed to deepen every time we touched. You're different, my colleague Sarah mentioned one afternoon as we reviewed patient charts. Happier, more, centered? I could feel myself blushing, but I couldn't deny it. Luna's influence on my life was impossible to hide. The breathing techniques she taught me had become part of my daily routine, and the confidence she helped me find in my own body had spilled over into my professional life. I was more present with my patients, more intuitive, more willing to trust the process instead of trying to control every variable. I've been working with a birth educator, I said, which was true, if not the whole truth. Learning some new approaches. But it was Luna herself who was changing me, not just her techniques. The way she moved through the world with such self-assurance, the way she saw beauty and power in things I'd started to take for granted, the way she looked at me like I was something precious and strong and worth cherishing. 3 months in, we had our first real fight. It started small, a disagreement about a mutual client who wanted a home birth despite some risk factors that made me nervous. Luna felt confident in her ability to handle complications. I wanted the woman to deliver at the hospital with me as her midwife. She's low risk, Luna insisted as we sat in her kitchen after a particularly tense phone conversation with the client. Her pregnancy has been textbook perfect, and she's desperate for the home birth experience. Low risk doesn't mean no risk, I countered. What if something goes wrong? What if she hemorrhages or the baby needs resuscitation? You're an hour from the nearest hospital. And you're talking like birth is a disaster waiting to happen, Luna shot back, her voice rising. This is exactly what I mean about the medical model. You see pathology everywhere instead of trusting that women's bodies know what they're doing. I'm not seeing pathology, I said, frustrated. I'm seeing reality. I've had women hemorrhage with no warning, babies who needed immediate intervention. Being prepared isn't the same as being paranoid. Being prepared is fine, she said. Being controlling isn't. The word hung between us like a slap. Controlling. It was my deepest fear about myself. The criticism I'd heard whispered in nursing school. The thing I worked hardest to avoid in my practice. I'm not trying to control anything, I said quietly. I'm trying to keep people safe. Luna's expression softened when she heard the hurt in my voice. Christina, I didn't mean ... No, you did mean it, I said, standing up. And maybe you're right. Maybe I am too controlling. Maybe that's why my last relationship ended, why I'm 34 and have never learned how to trust anyone else to take care of things. I was heading for the door when Luna caught my arm. Hey, she said gently. Hey, look at me. I turned, and she kept my face in her hands the way she had that first night. I was wrong to say that, she said. You're not controlling, you're careful, you're thorough. You care so much about your patients that you can't bear the thought of anything happening to them. That's not a flaw, Christina. That's what makes you incredible at what you do. Then why does it feel like a flaw? I asked, my voice small. Because someone convinced you that caring deeply was the same as not trusting enough, she said. But it's not. We can both be right. I can trust in the natural process, and you can prepare for the exceptions. We can work together instead of against each other. And that's what we did. We developed a protocol for high-risk home births that satisfied both of our concerns. Luna would handle the labor support and education. I would be present as medical backup, and we'd have clear parameters for when to transfer to the hospital. It wasn't a compromise so much as a synthesis, a new approach that honored both of our philosophies. The client agreed enthusiastically, and when she went into labor 2 weeks later, everything went perfectly. I watched Luna work with a new appreciation for her skills, seeing how her techniques helped the woman stay calm and focused even when labor intensified, and she watched me handle a minor complication with swift competence, seeing that my medical training enhanced rather than interfered with the natural process. Afterward, as we cleaned up and debriefed, Luna pulled me aside. "I learned something tonight," she said. "What's that?" "That watching you work is incredibly sexy." I laughed, exhausted but exhilarated. "Really? Even when I'm elbow deep in medical equipment?" "Especially then," she said, kissing me softly. "Competence is hot, Christina Cox." That night, she used her techniques on me with a new intensity, and I surrendered with a trust I'd never managed before. We were learning each other's languages, finding ways to blend our different approaches into something stronger than either of us could create alone. It started with small things. A feeling of being watched when I walked to my car after late shifts. Luna mentioning that she'd seen the same van parked outside her building 3 days running. Phone calls that hung up when we answered. The kind of incidents that could be explained away individually, but that began to form a pattern that made us both uneasy. 6 months into our relationship, the pattern became impossible to ignore. I was leaving the birthing center late one Thursday night when I noticed the man. He was standing across the street, smoking a cigarette and trying too hard to look casual. Something about his posture, the way he turned slightly away when I glanced in his direction, set off every alarm bell I had. Instead of walking to my car, I ducked back inside the center and called Luna. "Hey," she answered on the second ring. "You heading home?" "There's someone watching the building," I said quietly. "A man across the street. I don't like it." "Stay there," she said immediately. "I'm coming to get you." "Luna, you don't need to, Christina." Her voice was firm. "Stay there." 20 minutes later, she pulled up in her battered Honda, and I made a quick dash to the passenger seat. The man was gone, but I could still feel the ghost of his surveillance on my skin. "This is getting weird," Luna said as we drove toward my apartment. "The van, the phone calls, now this. Maybe we should call the police." "And tell them what?" "That we have a feeling something's wrong." She was quiet for a moment. "There's something I haven't told you," she said finally. A chill ran down my spine. "What?" "One of my clients mentioned something strange last week." She said a man approached her outside the coffee shop near my studio, asking questions about me. What kind of services I provided, how long I'd been in business, whether I worked with other healthcare providers. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I hoped it was nothing." "Because I didn't want to scare you over what might be paranoia." But it wasn't paranoia. The next week, Luna's apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, not her laptop, not her jewelry, not the cash she kept in a jar on her kitchen counter. But her files had been rifled through, her client records disturbed. And there was a feeling in the air like someone had been searching for something specific. "They went through everything," she said, her voice shaking as we surveyed the damage. "My birth records, my business files, even my personal journals." I put my arms around her, feeling her trembling against me. "Did you call the police?" "They came and went." Said it looked like kids looking for drugs or electronics, probably scared off before they could take anything. "But Christina ... She pulled back to look at me. "This wasn't random. They knew exactly what they were looking for." "What could they possibly want with birth records?" "I don't know, but I think we need to find out." We spent the evening going through her files systematically, looking for any pattern, any client or case that might have attracted unwanted attention. It was Luna who made the connection. "Look at this," she said, spreading several client files across her kitchen table. "These 5 women, they all live in the same building complex downtown, Riverside Apartments." I leaned over to look at the files. So 3 of them mentioned the same thing during our sessions, that they were getting incredible deals on rent because the building was being used for some kind of research study. They thought it was about urban development or housing patterns. A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Luna, what kind of research requires breaking into midwives' files?" "The kind that isn't really about urban development," she said grimly. The next day, I did some research of my own. Riverside Apartments was owned by a shell company that was owned by another shell company that eventually traced back to Meridian Research Group, a private corporation with contracts to several pharmaceutical companies and government agencies. Christina, Luna said when I showed her what I'd found, I think we're in over our heads. But we were about to discover just how deep those waters really were. The warning came in the form of a man in an expensive suit who appeared at Luna's studio during one of her classes. He waited politely until the session was over, then approached her with a smile that never reached his eyes. Miss Kelly? My name is David Harrison. I represent Meridian Research Group, and I'd like to discuss a business opportunity with you. Luna told me about it that night, her voice tight with anxiety. He knew things, Christina. Personal things about my clients, about my methods. He said they were interested in studying alternative birthing practices and wanted to hire me as a consultant. What did you tell him? I told him I wasn't interested, but he didn't seem surprised. He just smiled and said he hoped I'd reconsider and that he'd be in touch. Luna, I said carefully, I think we need to be very careful. Here, I know, but I also think we need to warn those women at Riverside. If they're being used as test subjects without their knowledge, ... She was right, but I was terrified. We were talking about going up against people with resources and reach far beyond anything we could match. But those women deserve to know what was happening to them. We decided to start with Sarah Martinez, one of Luna's clients who was due in 3 weeks. She lived on the 8th floor of Riverside with her partner and 2-year-old daughter, and when we knocked on her door that Saturday afternoon, she welcomed us with the warmth of someone genuinely happy to see familiar faces. Luna, Christina, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in. Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with the accumulated comfort of a growing family. Her partner, Maria, was in the kitchen making coffee, and their daughter was playing with blocks. On the living room floor, Sarah, Luna said gently, we need to talk to you about something serious, about this building. Sarah's expression shifted from welcome to concern. Is something wrong? We think you and the other pregnant women in this building might be part of some kind of study without your knowledge, I said. Have you noticed anything unusual? People asking questions, strange visitors, anything that seemed off? Sarah and Maria exchanged a look that told me we'd hit something. The maintenance requests, Maria said slowly. They always want to come in when Sarah's home, and they ask the weirdest questions. Not about plumbing or electrical, but about how she's feeling, whether she's having any unusual symptoms. And the building manager, Sarah added, Mrs. Chun, she's been really interested in my pregnancy, asking about my due date, whether I'm planning to deliver at home or in the hospital. I thought she was just being friendly, but no. No, it sounds like surveillance, Luna finished grimly. We talked for another hour, piecing together a pattern of intrusive questions, unusual interest in the pregnant residents, and subtle pressure to use certain doctors and clinics. By the time we left, Sarah and Maria were scared but determined to help us figure out what was happening. We'll be careful, Sarah promised. But Luna, you have to promise me something too. What? Promise me you'll be careful too. If these people broke into your apartment, if they're watching Christina's workplace, this isn't just about us anymore. That night, Luna and I lay in bed planning our next moves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being reactive. Instead of proactive, always one step behind people who had every advantage. What if we're making this worse? I asked, what if by digging into this, we're putting those women in more danger? Luna turned to face me in the darkness. What if by not digging into this, we're letting them be used as lab rats? She was right, but that didn't make me feel any better about the risks we were taking. Our investigation might have ended there, 2 scared women deciding they were in over their heads, if not for what happened to Elena Rodriguez. Elena was another of Luna's clients at Riverside, 7 months pregnant with her 2nd child. She'd been complaining of unusual fatigue and nausea, symptoms that seemed severe even for pregnancy. Luna had recommended she see her regular OB, but when Elena went for her appointment, the doctor dismissed her concerns and prescribed a new prenatal vitamin that Elena had never heard of. It's experimental, Elena told us when we met her at a coffee shop far from her building. Part of a study they're doing on maternal nutrition. The doctor said I was selected because I fit the profile perfectly. What profile? I asked. My medical training making me hyper alert to anything involving experimental treatments during pregnancy. Young, healthy, low-risk pregnancy, living in a specific geographic area. Elena paused, frowning. Actually, she knew I lived at Riverside. Before I told her, said it was in my file. Luna and I exchanged glances. Elena, Luna said carefully, did you consent to be part of any study? No, I mean, I signed some paperwork when I moved into the building, but it was just the lease and insurance stuff. Nothing about medical research. Do you still have those papers? I asked. Elena nodded. At home. Why? You think something's wrong? We think you should get a second opinion about those vitamins, I said. And we think you should read every word of the paperwork you signed when you moved in. Elena came back to us 3 days later with photocopies of her lease agreement and a manila folder full of documents she'd never read carefully. Buried in the fine print of what looked like standard rental paperwork was a clause authorizing health and wellness monitoring of residents who met certain demographic criteria. It's probably not legally binding, I said, studying the language. You can't consent to medical experimentation without knowing that's what you're consenting to. But they can argue that she did consent, Luna pointed out. And in the meantime, what's in those vitamins? What kind of monitoring are they doing? I had an idea, but it required calling in a favor from someone I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Dr. James Chen, no relation to the building manager, was a colleague from my residency who now worked in pharmaceutical research. He was one of the good ones, someone who'd gotten into the field to help people, not to make money. If anyone could help us figure out what we were dealing with, it would be him. Christina, he said when I called him at his lab, this is a surprise. How? Are you? I'm good, James, but I need a favor. A big one. I explained the situation as carefully as I could, emphasizing the consent issues and the potential risks to pregnant women. James listened without interruption, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Can you get me a sample of the vitamins? He asked finally. Probably. Why? Because what you're describing sounds familiar. There's been talk in the research community about some pharmaceutical companies doing off-the-books testing of new compounds. Nothing proven, just rumors. But ... double quotes, he paused. Christina, if these women are being used as unknowing test subjects, this is huge. Illegal, unethical, and potentially dangerous. Elena was able to save several of the experimental vitamins for US, and James agreed to analyze them in his lab. While we waited for results, Luna and I tried to document everything we could about the situation at Riverside. We talked to more pregnant residents, mapped out the building's ownership structure, and started keeping detailed records of every suspicious incident. It was during this time that the intimidation escalated. Luna's car was vandalized, all 4 tires slashed, windows broken. The message was clear and unmistakable. When she reported it to the police, they suggested it might be related to her. Lifestyle choices, a comment that made Luna so angry she was shaking when she got home. They know about us, she said, pacing around her living room like a caged animal. Someone told them we're together, and they think they can use that to shut us up. Maybe we should let them, I said quietly. Luna stopped pacing and stared at me. What? Maybe we should back off. Turn what we have over to the authorities and let them handle it. What authorities, Christina? The police who think my car got vandalized because I'm gay. The FDA who might take months to investigate. While those women are taking experimental drugs. She was right, but I was scared. Not just for us, but for what we might uncover if we kept digging. James called us the next day with results that confirmed our worst fears. The vitamins contain a compound I've never seen before, he said over the phone, his voice tight with professional outrage. It's some kind of synthetic hormone that appears to affect fetal development. Based on the molecular structure, I guess they're testing its effects on brain development or neurological function. My blood went cold. James, what kind of effects? I don't know. That's what makes this so dangerous. They're experimenting on pregnant women and their babies without any idea what the long-term consequences might be. Can you prove it's dangerous? I can prove it's untested and unlicensed. I can prove that giving it to pregnant women without informed consent is a violation of every medical ethics standard in existence. Whether I can prove it's actively harmful... He paused. That would require more time and resources than I have. But you'll help us? Luna asked. She was on speakerphone, sitting close enough to me that I could feel her tension. I'll help you, James confirmed. But Christina, you need to understand what you're getting into. If this is what it looks like, you're talking about a major pharmaceutical company conducting illegal human experiments. These people have lawyers, money, and political connections. They will not go down without a fight. After we hung up, Luna and I sat in silence for a long time. "We can't stop now," she said finally. "I know," I replied, even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. "Those women trust us. Those babies ... She shook her head. "Christina, what if this stuff causes birth defects? What if it affects cognitive development? We could be looking at dozens of children whose lives are changed forever because we didn't have the courage to keep fighting." She was right. We couldn't stop, but we also couldn't keep going alone. The decision to go public with what we discovered wasn't made lightly. We knew that once we involved journalists and activists, there would be no going back. The story would take on a life of its own, and we'd lose any control we might have had over the narrative. But Elena made the decision for us. She went into labor at 36 weeks, not dangerously early, but earlier than expected. During the delivery, her baby showed signs of respiratory distress that required immediate intervention. The pediatricians couldn't explain it. The baby's lungs were developed enough for his gestational age, but something was interfering with normal breathing patterns. "They're running tests," Elena told us from her hospital bed, her voice exhausted and scared. "But they keep asking about my medical history, whether I've been exposed to any chemicals or medications." "Christina, what if it's the vitamins?" Luna and I looked at each other across Elena's hospital bed. We both knew we couldn't prove a connection, but we also both knew we couldn't ignore the possibility. "Elena," I said gently, "we need to talk to you about getting a lawyer." "A lawyer? Why?" "Because you and your baby might have been the victims of medical experimentation without your consent," Luna said bluntly, "and because you might not be the only ones." That night, we called Sarah Martinez and the 3 other pregnant women we'd identified at Riverside. We met at a community center across town, far from any possible surveillance, and laid out everything we'd discovered. The reaction was exactly what we'd expected: shock, anger, fear, and a determination to do something about it. "My baby's due in 2 weeks," said Carmen, the youngest of the group. "What do I do? What if I have already hurt her?" "You haven't hurt anyone," Luna said firmly. "You're the victim here, not the perpetrator. But we need to make sure no other women go through this." "How?" asked Sarah. "These people have money and power. What do we have?" "We have the truth," I said, "and we have each other." It sounded naive even to me, but sometimes naive is all you have to work with. Our first call was to Lisa Park, an investigative journalist who specialized in corporate malfeasance. I'd read her work on pharmaceutical companies and thought she might be interested in our story. "Interested?" she said when we met at a diner downtown. "This is exactly the kind of story I live for, but I need more than what you have. I need documentation, corroboration, preferably someone on the inside willing to talk." "What about the lab results?" Luna asked. "Helpful, but not enough. A pharmaceutical company can always claim the compound was contamination or a manufacturing error. I need evidence of intent, of systematic deception." It was Carmen who provided our breakthrough. As the youngest and newest resident of Riverside, she'd been subjected to more intensive monitoring than the others. Her lease agreement was different, more detailed, and included clauses that were much more explicit about health monitoring and data collection. "Look at this," she said, showing us the paperwork. "It actually mentions pharmaceutical research partnerships and health outcome studies. It's right there in black and white." Lisa's eyes lit up when she saw Carmen's lease. "This is it," she said. "This is proof of intentional deception. They buried consent for medical research and rental paperwork, knowing tenants wouldn't read the fine print." "Is that enough for a story?" I asked. "It's enough for a story," Lisa confirmed. "But more importantly, it's enough for a lawsuit." The lawyer Sarah Martinez found was exactly what we needed: someone with experience in medical malpractice and corporate liability, someone who wasn't afraid of going up against well-funded opponents. Margaret Winters was in her 50s, with silver hair and the kind of direct gaze that probably terrified corporate attorneys. When we laid out our case in her office, she listened without interruption, taking notes and asking pointed questions. "The good news," she said when we finished, "is that you have a strong case. Informed consent violations, potential harm to mothers and babies, deceptive business practices. The bad news is that this is going to get ugly before it gets better." How ugly? Luna asked. They'll go after your personal lives, your professional credentials, your motivations for bringing the case. They'll try to paint you as troublemakers, as anti-science activists, as people with personal grudges. And they'll do it with more money and better lawyers than we have. But you'll take the case? I asked. Margaret smiled, and it was like watching a predator scent prey. Oh, honey, I wouldn't miss this for the world. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in February. Lisa's article was thorough, well-researched, and damning. She'd managed to track down 2 former Meridian employees who confirmed that the company was conducting unauthorized medical research on pregnant women in multiple cities. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Our phones started ringing before 8 a.m. with interview requests, legal inquiries, and support from people we'd never met. But there were also threats, anonymous calls suggesting we should stop, stirring up trouble, emails warning us about the consequences of biting the hand that feeds you. We did it, Luna said as we sat in her apartment that evening, surrounded by printouts of news articles and legal documents. We actually did. We started it, I corrected. Now the real work begins.